So we're starting Unit 5, which is on page 97 in your handbook, and we're looking at the unity and diversity of life. So at this point we know, if you'll circle the title Life, we know that all living things are made of cells. And so we want to start looking at what they have in common, how they are unified, or how we see unity, and how they're different, diversity. So we're going to be talking about the 6 kingdoms or major classification. If you remember from section 4.3, we have the terms domain that you see here in the picture, but then the domains are divided up into kingdoms. So when we look at how all living things are similar, we see that all living organisms descended from a common set of cells, and so therefore they share common characteristics. And so we've been talking about this idea of the very first cells that formed, and how those first cells mutated and became different types of living things over really long periods of time and many, many generations. We do see that since they originated from a common set of cells, they have common characteristics, and these take us all the way back to the beginning of the year, where we talked about things like synthesis, transport, excretion, regulation, nutrition, growth and development, reproduction, and respiration. And so we're going to be revisiting the Sternger characteristics or processes throughout Unit 5. We're going to start today just by really focusing in on these 6 kingdoms. Living organisms do have differences, so they are classified based on the physical and evolutionary similarities. How are these organisms similar to each other? Into 3 domains. Remember, if you'll write out to the side, that our levels of classification are domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So we have 3 domains. Domain bacteria, or eubacteria. Remember, EU means true. So these are what we first knew as bacteria. When you think about strep, like strep throat, Streptococcus pyogenes, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Staphylococcus, E. coli, those are what we originally understood bacteria to be, and so that's why they're called eubacteria. Archaeobacteria contains 1 kingdom of archaeobacteria, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. And then domain eukarya, so we have 3 domains. Domain bacteria has 1 kingdom, domain archaea has 1 kingdom, but domain eukarya has 1, 2, 3, 4 kingdoms. Because these are all eukaryotic cells. And so we see this example of classification and how we can group living organisms. The first 2 kingdoms that we're going to look at are eubacteria and archaeobacteria. And of course, this is going to be really important for people who are in the medical field. If you go in with an infection, we need to know what type of organism you've been infected with so that we can properly treat you. And so we have eubacteria, which are prokaryotic, unicellular, have a cell wall. For metabolism, we see that some bacteria will make their own food and some will consume food. And so we see a lot of similarities between eubacteria and archaeobacteria. Both are prokaryotic and unicellular. Both have cell walls. Both are able to, we see diversity. We don't mean that they can switch back and forth, that one day they make their own food and the next day they have to consume food. We mean that some bacteria can make food and some eubacteria have to consume it, same with archaea. The big difference that we see here is that archaea live in extreme environments. And what we mean by extreme environments is where it's really hot, where it's really salty, and where it's really Remember, heat, acid, and salt can denature enzymes. So normally living things don't live in places like the Dead Sea. It's why it's called the Dead Sea, because it's so salty. But they have found archaea bacteria that are able to live there. And so we see that they're similar, but that they share, and so they share some common characteristics, but archaea are really those extreme bacteria. Next we have kingdom Protista. And this is a really interesting kingdom because it has some that are plant-like, some that are animal-like, and some that are fungi-like. Plant-like, animal-like, or fungi-like. What we do notice, and what could be a little confusing, is that the kingdom is called Protista, but it's made of eukaryotic cells. And so we want to really put a star by eukaryotic. And let's even write out to the side Eutista. I wish this kingdom was called Eutista. However, Protista actually means the very first. These are the very first prokaryotic cells. You can see how they kind of branched off. And so protists are supposed to represent the very first eukaryotic cells. But you can think of them as Eutista because they are eukaryotic. They are complex. So they have things like mitochondria. Some of them have chloroplasts. They'll have an endoplasmic reticulum, vacuole, lysosomes. Some will have cell walls. The ones that are plant-like and fungi-like will have cell walls. Some will make food, the ones that are plant-like. And the fungi and animal-like ones will consume food. So we see that we start to get into really diverse groups. The last section is on the three kingdoms that you're probably most familiar with: plants, animals, and fungi. And so Plantae is going to be eukaryotic. If you'll remember, protists, plants, fungi, and animals are all going to be eukaryotic. They come from the domain eukarya, and so they are all eukaryotic. My pen keeps disappearing. So if you will, circle or square or put a bracket with these four and write eukaryotic. Eukaryotic. These four are all eukaryotic. These three are all multicellular. So protists can be unicellular or multicellular. But plants are always multicellular. They have complex organelles like a chloroplast and a cell wall. And they always make their own food. And so this is a new word for us here called autotrophs. Autotroph means that you feed yourself. Troph means feed, and auto means self. So you are self-feeding. And they are producers in the food web. And we're going to look at that in Unit 6. But the main idea is that plants produce all of the food for Earth. Fungi are eukaryotic. They can be unicellular or multicellular. They have complex organelles. They have a cell wall, but notice, no chloroplasts, which means they can't feed themselves. They will digest or consume food. But fungi do it in a really interesting way. They actually excrete their enzymes. See, animals consume food, but we chew our food, swallow it, it goes into our stomach and intestines, and that's where it gets digested. Fungi will secrete their enzymes into their environment, break down the food, and then slurp it up. Kind of like if you were to spit into a bowl of spaghetti, let it break down and then slurp it up. That's kind of what fungi do. And they are decomposers. Next to decomposers, if you'll write break down waste. Decomposers break down waste. And then finally, we have the animal kingdom, which should be pretty familiar to you. They are eukaryotic and multicellular. They do have complex organelles, but no cell wall. Animal cells never have a cell wall. They consume food, so they are heterotrophic, and their important role is that they are consumers. And so this is where we're going to stop for today. Please make sure that you've completed this chart and your summary box.